Several people have been shot in Kenya in clashes between security forces and protesters. Residents are protesting over the high cost of living and tax hikes. This week, protesters hurled rocks at police and burned tyres in the streets, while the security forces fired volleys of tear gas. It was the third round of anti-government demonstrations the opposition called this month. Let's get the latest update with Kenyan journalist Gorden Osen from the Star in Nairobi. Gordon, great to catch up with you again. Now, what are the main reasons behind these demonstrations in Kenya?
The demonstrations in Kenya is founded on the passage of a controversial finance law that currently is suspended by the courts, by the High Court, and the court case is ongoing to substantively determine its merit or demerits. But civil society groups and the political opposition have marshaled protests from disgruntled Kenyans who complain about high cost of living. And what has added insult to the injury is the fact that despite a valid court order existing, the government has gone ahead to hike the price of fuel, and that has a knock-on effect on every other facet of economic life. So life is pretty hard in Kenya, and that is why protesters are on the street expressing their political views.
Now, one of the things that we've picked up is that the reason that the government introduced this tax hike was to pay off a huge amount of debt. But word out is that Kenya is not in debt. Is this the position?
Yes, the debt burden is a continuing conversation in the country because the previous administration, which our current president was part of, because he was the deputy president, accumulated huge commercial debts, which are maturing in billions of dollars, not in very far from this year or this month. So government is trying to find a way of, and of course with the strong hand of IMF and those international organizations, they're trying to find a way of letting the country live within its means and pay off its debts without having to ground the economy to a halt. So that is exactly what's going on currently. But of course, as I told in our last broadcast when I appeared, these are also controversy about the debt burden that we are having, the debt stroke. There are concerns. Civil society groups are complaining that some of those debts never reach the country, and so it's an ongoing conversation that we never know where it will end.
So let's talk about Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, who appears to be a third force in all of this. He is a powerful individual, and he's the one who's really has been behind the protests, is he not?
Yes, Raila Odinga is a pretty enigmatic politician in our country. He has run for presidency 5 times, and he believes that he has only lost once. But of course, the formal government documents, including the Supreme Court, show that he has lost consistently for those 5 attempts. But he has maintained that he did not lose the elections fairly, and that actually was the one who won the election. And so he has conflated, so to speak, the discontent about the economic situation in the country to mobilize his supporters to the streets to express his dissatisfaction with the election. His demand has been that the government or the Electoral Commission opens the election servers so that the results of the August 2022 elections are audited. So we never know where this is going to end. But the government has, as a response to this, the latest wave of protest with a heavy hand, there has been arrest. And even as we speak, no one knows where Raila Odinga is. He's been, media reports have been suggesting that he's under the weather, that he's having a strong strain of flu. But his bodyguard was arrested, was kidnapped by government. His security personnel had been detached. And there's been arrest of many opposition politicians that are aligned to him. So we only put our eyes to see what this will happen. But also to note is that the opposition that he leads have also announced that the protests have not ceased, that next Wednesday we still have the anti-government protest in the country.
Well, let's talk about the heavy-handedness of the police forces
Again, the question,
in Kenya. And this all on the back of that announcement by President William Ruto, where he said that it was not acceptable, that this was not going to happen under his watch.
Yes, there has been push and there has been hope, frankly, and push by every sectoral voice, right from religious leaders to political players to international platforms. international players. They've been pushing that these two politicians, President Ruto and his counterpart, the opposition figure Raila Odinga, to find a common ground in a one-on-one dialogue, because the grievances, the economic, social, and political grievances can be discussed between the two of them and a settlement reached. But William Ruto, on one hand, argues that Raila Odinga has a history of forcing his way to a government, through the back door. After election, allegedly losing elections, he mobilized his supporters to go to the street and then make the country ungovernable and find a way of, through dialogue, through handshake, through whatever other thing, find his way on the right side of government. And he's been blamed. What is currently being blamed for the current stalemate are what we newspaper writers call hardliners, in the rank, especially in the government rank, because they feel that if Raila comes to the question, they will be left in the political cold, because Raila will be relevant, because Raila comes with a huge chunk of his constituency. So we push for dialogue, but we don't know where it will end.
Is it a fair statement then that Raila Odinga is trying to make Kenya ungovernable in order to weave his way into government? Does he have an actual track record of doing this?
Well, whether or not it's a fair statement is for the partisans to argue, people who support him and people who don't support him to argue whether or not that's a fair statement. But what I think the history shows, and if you delve into it, you will also have to deal with the question of, is it fair to claim that he has been cheated out of elections consistently? I think the jury is out there. Everybody has their mind to make. But as a professional journalist, what we report is that the official results show that he was off the mark. Like the past election, it was fairly close. Just 200,000 votes that was separating between him and the president. And in fact, just to mention, it was a painful loss for his supporters, because this time Raila Odinga was supported by the president who left office. So the government, so to speak, a good percentage of them supported him. So they expected that this time the stars were aligning, but they did not. So I think if anybody claims that he forces his way to government, that is up to debate, because formally he was not part of the last administration. He was only friendly to the government, kind of making his position position team to be quiet and to let the government work. In 2007, everybody believes that the election was questionable. They formed a coalition government. It was formally recognized. So I think it's a debate. It's a political debate that every partisan have their own views on.
Now, in clips that we've seen where individuals and business are speaking, they're talking about how successful this call to action by Raila Odinga has been. But it's also had an economic impact, in that small to medium enterprises cannot operate. If they do open, there are no customers. What are the total costs to the economy of Kenya at the moment? Have those numbers been tabled yet?
The numbers, again, because we're in a political toxic time, the numbers being floated around, you get to take them with a pinch of salt. Because last week, on Wednesday, there was a protest which was widespread. And protesters descended on the Nairobi Expressway, which is Chinese built, and they visited enormous vandalism. And the following day, the cabinet minister in charge of infrastructure and transport appeared before TV cameras and claimed that up to 700,000 Kenyan shillings, 700 million Kenyan shillings, that is around $500 million, worth of repairs will have to be forked out from the taxpayers' coffers. But then, 48 hours down the line, Kenya was hosting the mid-year planning meeting of the AU, the African Union, and presidents from all over the continent were in Nairobi. And the place was spruced up. It had been repaired. Contrary to what the minister said, that the repair works will take longer. So then you see such kind of claim again denies them the credibility that he needs, because they've been pushing a narrative that Raila and his supporters are destructive and vandals. So this is that from that political lens that again makes determining the cost very, very hard. But there's a critical body here that's called Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and also part of the private sector alliance. They've been saying that the economy has been losing around 2.5 billion Kenya shillings for every day that the protest has been proceeding. So I think Kenya, if the last week alone for the 3 days, because the economy was literally shut down, no one was going to work, and for those who are going to work, very minimal movement was happening, and disruption was massive. So if you do 2.5 billion Kenya shillings, so you at the end of the week you bring about close to 8 billion or thereabout. And if you do that, then you can do that in terms of the currency that your audience understands, and that will show you that it's enormous loss, because the revenues are not being generated, tax revenue will be generated, and the people are not going to work, and so nothing is moving. So in terms of the economic cost, the cost is massive, and that is exactly the point of the opposition. They want to do as much disruption as possible because they're doing resistance, they're doing civil disobedience, and I think that plays into their hands and makes them achieve their objective. So if you ask me, are protests successful? Yeah, they are, except that there's so much carnage in terms of killing, and the killing has been shown consistently, and even the UN human rights body has shown the killings and the carnage is being done by the police and a private militia that is pro-government, that has been hired by politicians aligned with the government, and who have been planted into the police to do the killing, to evade accountability.
Gorden Osen, as always, appreciate your time and giving us clarity on that situation in Kenya, as a demonstration has been called by Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga.